Hey everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson. Plus this week, special guest Andrea Stanley from Valley Malt, who I'll let your host give a more formal introduction to in just a minute or two. Real quick, before I turn things over, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. Just want to point out a few ways, as always, that you can interact with your host and their guests throughout the show today. So to your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining in from all over the world. Always cool to see that. If you have a question at any point during the live stream, there's a little button at the bottom that says ask a question on it. So that's the button to press if you have a question. Best way to make sure that we see it. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes that easy. But with all of that said, Lou, Liz, Marty, I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you, Will, and thanks for putting that share button because I'm a big fan of hers. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Duffy. I am a former senior master of whiskey for Diageo's Whiskey, 14 glorious years before being shunted aside. And then nearly 2 years as the sole North American brand ambassador for Benedictine. This bottle used to be a 750 back when I was actually working for him. It gets smaller as time goes on. And then for 8.5 years, 8 years, I was co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. But for the last 6, soon to be 7 years, I've been the sole brand representative for Glencairn Crystal in North America. Yep. So there you go. And there's Shadow Tuna, the cat.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cat cameo.
Oh, sorry, Lewis. Or no, Liz. Liz is next. Liz.
Thanks, Marty.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have just over a decade of experience in the alcoholic beverage sector, spanning across several different products and substrates, including beer, rum, vodka, my particular favorite expertise, whiskey, duh. Spent most of my career at a small little outfit called Diageo, but now I'm currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And hey, wanting to know more, scroll down to the About the Host section. There's a little link to my website. I'm not on Instagram, as we all found out today, but I have a website, so check it out. Nope.
Liz, feeling loose today. I like it.
It's the light.
It's the light, right? You have the warming light on. I'm Lou Bryson, a whiskey writer of some years. I was the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years, after which I went back on the freelance market, and I'm currently a senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast. Check out my Blue Spot article, which is up currently, and my latest book, Whiskey Masterclass, my former classic book, Tasting Whiskey. Thank you very much, guys. I just try to spread the word of whiskey as much as I can. And the whiskey I am going to be drinking during today's show is Turkana, single malt, 10-year-old with a port finish.
Still celebrating a little St. Patty's Day, are you? Very good.
There's always a little left over. Joining us today is a good friend of mine, Andrea Stanley. Hi, Andrea. Andrea is the founder and principal of Valley Malt in, is it Hadley or West Hadley? I can never remember.
Hadley.
Hadley, Massachusetts.
Hadley's so small, there's no
West. That's the next town. She is a pioneer in the small maltings, craft maltings industry in the world, really. I was going to say in America, but that's not really true. She and her husband have been working this gig for 12 years.
10.
No. So 2011 you started.
Well, I guess I pretend that 2020 didn't happen. So.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess 11 years. I can do math.
Very good. Comes good when it comes.
Am I back on?
Yes.
Yeah, aren't you?
You sound good.
You sound great, Lou. You sound best. You sound like Paul McCartney. Keep going, Lou. We'll just carry on without Lou because Lou's having technical difficulties in his head. Andrea, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into all of this. Were you?
Yeah, what's your background?
Yeah, what were you in the grain business? Were you in the drink industry prior to all this?
Prior to all of this, I was a vocational rehab counselor. So,
really?
Yeah. So I spent about 18 years working with individuals with disabilities, helping them to, set goals in terms of career and independent living, and mostly just social work in the realm of disability and employment, and working with entrepreneurship, teaching entrepreneurship to students with disabilities. So my background is really not any kind of background that would necessarily prepare somebody for entering into a life of becoming a maltster and eventually a miller as well. So a lot of it has been, just learning from talking to people and just being somebody who can try to get information where in informal ways. So that's basically 2009. I had this realization after reading an article in the local newspaper about wheat being grown in Massachusetts again after almost 100 years, and a local bakery using that to make bread. And I just had this, I was definitely somebody at the time, this was right around when Michael Pollan wrote a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma. And I was definitely interested in trying to, support local food systems. I thought that was something that was really relevant and important, and something that as an individual, I could make a difference in trying to support local farms. And so this article really made me think about grains, and really made me aware of the fact that grains are such a huge part of our diet. I mean, if you don't even consider liquids and just, basic nutrition, it's 60% of our diet is grain. And so when you think about where that grain comes from, and that most of it is these, huge corporations, and really only a handful of them throughout the world that process all the grain, that is 60% of our diet, you realize the impact of trying to restart that food system from a local level. So that's it was just sort of this like, hey, this is something I'm really interested in. Read this article and thought, what, craft beer is one of the coolest things in my life. I love home brewing. I love drinking craft beer. This is 2009, when there were still probably only 1,200 craft breweries in the country. And I thought, what, this could be an amazing little, business to start. Nobody was malting east of the Mississippi in 2009. And so it just seemed like a really interesting product to make. I mean, malting is very natural process. We don't really use any additives. It's, almost the same way it's been done for thousands and thousands of years. So all of these things were just really appealing to me, and was the reason why we decided to edge our way into becoming maltsters.
That's a cool name. You call them maltster?
It sure is.
Maltster, how are you? Boom. Yeah, kind of nice nickname. Funny too, I'm on a no carb diet right now. So now that you mentioned
grains. Yeah.
I can drink whiskey though. Whiskey has no carbs.
That's right. Well,
that's probably why you're on that particular diet.
It's an all whiskey diet. All whiskey diet.
So the interest to get in was, I mean, the balance between sustainable local food system versus craft beer. What did that look like? What was that initial sort of business plan or business model?
Well, the original questions that became the business plan was, can grain grow in the Northeast? Talk to a few people.
Yeah.
Yes. Grain can grow in the Northeast. It used to be grown in the Northeast. It's not indigenous to the Northeast. Grain arrived here with colonists, but it had been grown by them. And up until the point where transportation became easier through canals and rail, most grain was grown on a local level. People figured it out. So that's, you know, question one was, can we do it? Yes, we can. Can we get seed? Yes, we can. Can we find a farmer? We did. And that all took place in like a 3-month period from January of 2010 to April of 2010. We got that first 25 acres planted. And then from that moment on, it was, okay, how do we build a malt system? Luckily, my husband is a mechanical engineer and we knew some people that welded. And so we were able to kind of piece all of it together. And so then the next big question was, you know, are we going to be able to make good malt? And then that sort of process led to relationships with breweries who were willing to buy our malt and work with it and let us know whether or not they thought that it was good. So, and then that formed into a business plan. Once we answered those initial questions and made those assessments, then we thought, okay, we could, you know, do 1 ton of malt a week for the first year. You know, we're not going to leave our day jobs, but we're going to do this and we're going to, you know, steadily see where this could lead.
Well, what's the cut as far as when you started, say, 10 years ago? There was still a huge number of breweries, especially craft breweries. Were you catering more to them? Were they, when did all the distilleries start coming to you? And was that a thought from the get-go? And also too, you're talking about that bakery. Were you supplying grain to, you know, non-drink industry?
Yeah, you're right, because malt is actually a great natural sugar for baking as well. So there is actually a very large but very kind of, you know, similar to malt for brewing and distilling, although we're trying to make it a more, you know, take the veil away and show people what it is. But in the food industry, malt is used quite a bit for flavoring and for sweetening. It's a natural sweetener and flavor. And again, the veil, like, you know, very few people realize that it's in a lot of our food products. But for the most part, we were just supplying breweries in the beginning. There really were not a lot of craft distilleries in Massachusetts. I think Berkshire Mountain maybe was one of the first, and we worked with Chris Weld there initially. So yeah, mostly craft breweries were interested in making a truly local beer. So those were our first relationships, and most of them continue to this day and are the reason why we continue to grow our business.
So I had Lou. Okay.
No, please go ahead.
Just while we're talking about the journey of, reviving agricultural, specifically with the grain, the cereal scene. One of the questions I have were, what did that process look like in terms of, specific varietals that, were planted and kind of looked at? Because I know mid-Atlantic region specifically, there are some barley varietals that don't perform well at all in other regions. And Violetta is an example of that from a barley perspective, but it thrives in the mid-Atlantic region. What were some of those varietals, or what varietals did you try, and what did you land on given that specific, agronomics and environmental climate?
Yeah, great question. So initially what we did was we looked at the Red River Valley of North Dakota and some of the North Dakota varieties, because that area tended to be maybe not necessarily similar in climate, but they did have similar issues with disease and pre-harvest sprouting that the Northeast was already, that was assumed when we started talking with barley breeders like Pat Hayes, Rich Horsley, Tom, I forget his last name, but he used to work at Montana State now. It's Jamie, a new person there, but you know, they all said your biggest issues are going to be the wetness during and humidity during the sort of filling and maturation stage of the grain, and issues with pre-harvest sprouting. So we worked with North Dakota varieties initially because they tended to have, as a variety, more pre-harvest sprout resistance.
Yeah.
But then eventually where we really wanted to focus on, because of our particular area, is winter varietals. And similar to Violetta, these are varietals that have a lot of winter hardiness. So, you know, you can plant the seed in the fall, it grows a little bit, and then it goes dormant and then starts growing again in the spring before, you know, you don't have to plow the field and plant the seed. It's already growing. And so it has an advantage in terms of like weed pressure. So there was a lot of reasons why winter varieties were going to be really well suited for this area. And so, you know, we even investigated European varieties because, because, you know, you have areas of France that, you know, in Germany that have winter varieties. In fact, Violetta, I believe, comes from, you know, Ackermann, or one of the Germany.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, so varieties have always been a big part of our job, actually. You know, like you've got the day-to-day tasks that you have to do, but then there's sort of these bigger picture conversations that you need to constantly be having with the universities and the land grant colleges that are doing the variety trials. You know, make sure, can you start putting some European genetics into your variety trials so that we can see what they'll do. So all of those things are a big part of our job that I don't always get to talk about. So it's fun to talk with you guys about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about learning more about Northeast. And I guess a follow-up question to that, how does that affect crop rotation if that's something that you guys are implementing with your farmers? So I think in upper state New York, if they're doing spring and winter, I think those harvests are only a month apart. So I was just kind of curious about how these varietals are affecting your crop rotation.
So a lot of what potentially can happen with a winter variety, and it really depends, but like one of the growers that we work with rotates corn, winter grains, along with vegetables.
Oh, okay.
So it's a multi-year rotation where the winter grain, you might not necessarily get another crop in there that season, but it'll be sort of ready for the next season. So in a way, the winter grain is a fallow, a cover crop fallow for the farmer. We do have some farms that really manage to do a double crop where you'll do a winter barley with an early maturation date, and then you do a quick soy crop after that.
Right.
So that has worked for one or two of our growers. And yeah, there's definitely.
So you're saying two harvests. Are you saying that otherwise the crop that's just a cover crop is just getting disked in, or?
No, it would get, you would harvest. So you might plant your barley in October. You would harvest it in late June, early July. And then you might just put like a clover or another cover crop down and wait until that following May to plant corn or something like that.
Okay. I have to admit, the whole crop rotation thing, I learned about it in medieval history in college, and then I didn't think about it again until I started doing stories on places like you and Skagit Valley. You know, I
Yeah,
was like, oh, right, I did hear about that, because otherwise your ground turns to shit. So
Yeah,
It's super
really.
interesting.
I've seen. If you ever watch movies about farming, they always talk about that. It was even in the movie The Day After.
oh my god,
Yeah, after the
boom.
end of the world. Oh, Fliz. Sorry. Sorry, it was pre-2010. Film, you watch it on YouTube. It's about the end of the world, basically, about how farmers had to worry about rotating their crops, but they also lost topsoil because the nukes blew away all the topsoil. Do you ever deal with grain from a far field? I mean, you try to experiment, bring in stuff from, the hinterlands, is that what they call them? The Nordic countries or Russia or, Eastern Europe's?
Yeah, I mean, the University of Minnesota has Kevin Smith and his team there. They have a winter malt barley center there, I guess, for lack of a better word, where they trial winter genetics. And they have they had donations from the Vavilov Center in St. Petersburg, which, if you haven't heard of the story, look it up. But he was a barley and wheat and cereal scientist that did a lot to go around the world and collect all of these land races of grains from various elevations and places around the world, both centers of origin and centers of diversity, and collected them all in St. Petersburg in the seed bank. And during the siege of, I believe it was when Stalin came and there was like siege in the city, all of Vavilov's, he was taken to a prison where he starved, and then all of his workers there in the seed bank locked themselves in, and several of them died of starvation, saving these seeds from the place being burned down. And so there's a plot in Minnesota that Kevin Smith grows out every year of these seeds that came from that seed bank, and they carry with them an enormous amount of genetic diversity. And it's just really special. I happened to be there one year touring the variety trials, and one of the breeders from Russia had come over, and she gave us a tour of the trials and told us all about this amazing story. It was really fascinating. So yeah, we have, we're really into like historical varieties and this idea of landrace varieties. So I have gotten, my little 5 grams of these old varieties from the USDA seed bank and grown them out to the point where now we have 10, 20 acres of some of them growing, and we're making whiskey from them.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Who are you partnering with that, if you're allowed to?
What's that?
Who are you partnering with from a distilling perspective, if you're allowed?
Well, we ended up partnering with Matchbook Distilling on Long Island because they were willing to just kind of like, we're kind of sharing the barrel with them. We grow the seed, we grow the crop, we malt it, we send it to them. They're distilling it and aging it, and we're gonna, kind of have a portion of that 5-10 years from now.
Andrea, here's a question. I was going to wait till near the end to ask you, but since it was kind of brought up, so many malters and so many millers throughout history, and farmers who had grain decided just to start distilling their own grain. Have you guys ever thought about just putting a little distillery off to the side and doing some experimental stuff, just to toy around?
Not really.
Really?
Oh. No.
I know of a certain young lady over here, doesn't live too far from you. She could pop on down there, do a little distilling on the side. Probably bring her own still.
I do have a little copper still that I got from Portugal, but I use it for making essential oils from, like, I have a lavender field.
Wow.
So I use it for that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Malting, Lou, you had a great question. You know, we were just talking, you know, just about like what keeps you interested after 10 years. And it's like, there's so much just with malt, you know, and just with barley alone, that I don't know. I think I might
tell that just from the way you're talking about the varietals.
Crazy if I tried to add another thing to it.
You get one of the little junior members of the staff, you throw him in there. Just in a hurry, you go, hey, distill this, which I want to see what it tastes like.
You know, they did start the mill. I wanted to ask you about the mill. I just found out about the mill here recently.
Junior.
You started the mill in 2018. Is that right?
Yeah, I think 2019 probably was when we were like licensed and up and running.
Okay, and then this was, you know, right about the time you were having that initial thought about doing the malting. I remember having a conversation with a brew pub operator here in central Pennsylvania. They were trying to do local food as much as possible, and the guy was tearing his hair out because there were people growing grain, but he said, there's nobody milling it. There's nobody milling it. There's nobody malting. He said, I can't get local flour, essentially. Yeah. And, you know, all this stuff, you know, it's like when people ask me, why did whiskey take off? It was because I think it's because people were looking for a product with more, I don't know, more story to it. And, you know, people were looking to make the local stuff, you know, have the local cheese, have the people you knew. And there wasn't anybody you knew that was making flour. And now you are. Are you getting a good reception on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like this guy that you're talking about, he just had an awareness that some of us just don't have yet. But once you're aware of the fact that, you know, something is being grown around you and yet it's shipping off to a commodity market somewhere else, you know, I mean, this happens in Eastern Washington and in other, you know, places around. I mean, California didn't have its first malt house until just a few years ago. And yet, you know, there's a significant amount of grain that can be grown in California. So yeah, I think it's really about the awareness, like people knowing that this is something, because a lot of it has been somewhat secretive and taken away from our general, you know, the veil is there. And that I want to say is kind of almost like this like corporate veil, you know, where unless you have one of these huge malt houses in your backyard, how would you know what malting is? Yeah. And the same with milling, I think. You know, I mean, there's one of the largest milling companies in the world is headquartered in Boston. They're called New England Milling, but I'm pretty sure it's like all being done, you know, in some distant land. With grain coming, I mean, even here, you know, even in New York, there's a lot of commodity crops being grown, going off sometimes, you know, to China or to Korea or other places. So I think there's that awareness, and then there's also that like, well, you know, common sense would say if we can grow it around here, then, and obviously we're all eating, maybe we should think about being a little bit more secure in our where things are coming from and try to regionalize it again.
One of the Steve Jones at the Bread Lab out in Washington. Yeah, I remember one of the things he told me that has just made it's something I cannot get out of my head. How many thousands of mills there used to be in the United States, grain mills, and now there's about 100. And I mean, I recently went looking for them and found out that Pennsylvania actually has the most mills of any state, has 13. Wow.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, but it's not a lot, you know?
Yeah.
It used to be more.
And the other thing that he points out is, you know, when you had all those thousands of mills, it was also thousands of jobs.
Yep.
And
But there used to be a lot more farms too. We used to be more up
That's
until
true,
about I think up until about World War II, we were more of a rural society. I mean, the big cities were big, but there were still more people living outside the cities than in the cities, and that's kind of reversed. You had a lot more farms. I mean, nowadays.
Sure. But the thing is, I mean, you still have about the same number of acres under plow.
But that grain is now going overseas and being milled over there. I was amazed, Andrew, that you had to get a license to mill, which is kind of cool. You should put that on a plaque.
Oh my God! You're making a bomb joke, aren't you?
But I mean, it just seems you're grinding up grain. Well, I know there's more to it than that, but
no, you have to get a license to be a food manufacturer. For both milling and malting, you have to adhere to good manufacturing practices and be inspected, at least annually. And there's a lot that goes into, like, we're renovating a building in Holyoke, Massachusetts right now, which is going to be our new site for our mill and our malt house. And both milling and malting creates combustible dust. And so there's a lot to be concerned about in terms of safety around that. So those are the licenses really have to do with, making sure that we're keeping everybody safe.
Do you have different styles of milling? Like, have you ever visited the Mount Vernon distillery where they still stone?
You're stone ground, right?
We have stones. Yeah. So one of the things, Lou, that you mentioned about the lack of mills. So there was a lack of, like, if I wanted to buy a mill, it's not like I can go on Amazon and get that.
Get stones,
or a malt system, right? So like we had, because we're re-establishing small scale, you have to reestablish the manufacturing of the equipment to make that. And so there's one company in North Carolina, there's a company in Austria, and there's now the New American Stone Mill in Vermont. And really the fact that Andrew and Blair, the couple in Vermont that started the New American Stone Mill, the fact that they can make an affordable small scale mill is the reason why we started a mill. And I didn't want to try to figure out how to go quarry granite and so that these are the building blocks that we're all patiently working toward over a decade now. And I don't like to have to admit this, but it's going to be generations before, if this is really the future, and I keep hearing more and more after this pandemic in the news that the future of food is small and local. And if that's the case, it's going to take generations to
put it back in place,
to reestablish all of these shorter supply chains.
That's what I mean. I'm actually sitting in the town of Millheim right now, at home of the mills, and down at the other end of Main Street. I mean, I could walk over there and look out a window. There's a house with 2 millstones in the front yard because that was the flour mill, and why move them? They're millstones. So cool. So now they're literally sitting there in the yard. We see them every day when we walk the dog.
How big are they?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know, like 4 or 5 feet across.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere.
Don't have to worry about the local teenagers stealing them.
No. But this is, the town. We've looked at a map of the town from like 1870. There was a flour mill. There was a cloth mill. There was a
paper mill, probably.
Essentially water-powered forge. There was a paper mill. We had missed it, and I just saw it the other day. We were looking at the map again, and of course there was a tannery. Just because your town doesn't smell bad enough, you got to have a tannery. Yeah, but there were all these damn mills. There's still a mill race runs through town. Things were built on this. I'm doing this thing now where I'm going around and looking at all. I want to see all the covered bridges in Pennsylvania. I don't know, like 15% of them are so-and-so's mill covered bridge, because you'd have the mill set up on the water, and you'd want to have a bridge across so everybody on the other side could get to your mill.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is there
really
a river that runs through your town there, Lou? Big river?
Elk Creek. I mean, it's not a big river, but it's a steady one, and they had a weir built up to put a head of water on it.
Are they all located along?
They're all right along. Well, they're either along the creek or along the race. They built a race that runs out. It runs almost a mile out around town.
The town of Bushmills is supposed to originally be 7 mills on the Bush River, and that's where the town got its name, and the distillery and everything.
Well, there's still the Isle of Woolen Mills still runs on water power.
Oh, does it really?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah.
I mean,
my God. The drop there is amazing. He's got like a 35-foot drop, and I think he had 2 mills set up on it.
I went inside that. It was like going into a hobbit's house.
I know.
It had been dusted in a long time. Really cool place. If you're over on Isla, go there, but don't wear your tuxedo or anything in there.
Yeah, and don't wear anything that's got anything dangly, because they'll let you get right up on the machines. You don't want to get anything caught.
Not go in there nude.
Wait, this is in Isla?
Yeah.
Which distillery?
No. It's a woolen mill.
Oh, it's a
woolen
mill.
Like tartans.
Oh, darn, I missed that. I'm going to have to go back.
All that shit.
They made all the tartans.
Yeah, I couldn't. Wow, it was like tucked back in the woods.
Rob Roy and Braveheart, they made all the tartan. And so you go to it, and they go to it. It's really tiny. They also made Prince Philip's hunting jacket. So when I went in, I said, "Oh, I want a hunting vest with." I don't hunt, but I wanted a hunting vest. I was like, "Can I have a hunting vest, but with a Braveheart tartan?" And he says, "All right." And I go, "Well, do you want to measure me?" And he goes, "Already did."
Okay. So I'm just gonna bring it back.
Sorry, we
digress. Told you we
bring it back. Bring it back.
So, a question around how you landed on Stone Ground, assuming you were supplying a lot of bakeries, and what is that breakdown between distilleries and bakeries? I'm assuming most of the milling business is coming through on the baking side.
Yeah, our milling, so Ground Up is the name of our flour mill, and Ground Up is only 2 years old. We actually have a second mill now, so our mills we have siblings. And we really landed on that just because it kind of goes with our whole idea of wanting to create something that's like fresh and made to order. And so it just felt like the stone mill being made right up at the road was the way to go. So that mostly it's all bakeries and home bakers that are buying our flour. And of course, the pandemic brought a whole other level of business to us. But when it comes to like milling for distilleries and stuff, we're using a roller mill that's more for rolling malt. And one thing that we don't have is a hammer mill. So depending on, the grist size, we can sometimes pass our malt through our roller mill twice. But that is something probably in the future, depending on the need, we could potentially hammer mill for some of our distilling customers.
Now you're getting go ahead, Lizard.
Oh no, I was just gonna mention. I thought it was, and I'm glad you clarified with the roller mill, and we're talking about the different mill types. Going back to not very many mills in operation, Hodgson Mill, I know is one in Illinois that I've worked with, and basically, comparing what a whiskey would look like from roller versus hammer versus stone ground.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, it was an interesting project. And I mean, essentially, if you have the appropriate auger system, the appropriate vacuum system, and safety precautions, stone ground could actually be a pretty good way to go, just because of that grind profile, right? It's flour, right? So extract potential is so much more. But I would see going with the roller or hammer mill for on the craft side, again, just from a safety perspective alone, you know, having you know, a lot of dust in the air and that sort of thing, as you mentioned, could be pretty unsafe. But I was just curious if that's something your customers were asking for, interested in, or if that was something happening on the stone ground side also. But
yeah, no, I mean, it brings up a good point, because you know, when you think about like Mount Vernon, right? You know, how did that distillery mill rye to make rye whiskey? It was definitely a stone mill, I'm certain, right?
Oh, yeah.
It would have been anything else. So yeah, if you're really thinking about, especially like historic brewing and distilling, why not mill it through a stone mill?
Well, but is there a difference? And Liz, I don't know if you saw this with the one here in Illinois, but is there a difference as far as not just yield but flavor between hammer and stone?
Potentially there could be, but the other big piece of it is grain in situ fermentations versus wort. So obviously you can't separate and ferment a clear wort if you're using flour, right? Okay. So I think that's the other big piece to it, which is also I was kind of, you know, curious to see what people were doing on the craft space, you know, especially with the uptick of the American single malt category. You know, if people are going down the traditional route, because I've talked with, you know, several of my distiller friends, the good guys, shout out to them, around, you know, what's happening in the American single malt landscape if people are doing grain end fermentations, which is very akin to current, you know, grain whiskey practices, versus we're taking the more traditional nod and doing, you know, some separation from wort. So I you know, kind of hear both camps. So it's an interesting, because it all goes back up to, you know, the raw materials. So it's you know, I think to your point, this is why this work is so important. And
in just, you know, knowing how my mill functions, the stone mill, it would be really hard to get uniform coarse ground malted grain out of the stone mill. Just the friability of it, it just creates powder, even at a low pressure on the stones. So I'm not sure how they used to do it. They must have, you know, had a way, and that has disappeared with somebody. But I know that I have, you know, I put malt through our stone mill to make diastatic malt powder for baking.
Yeah.
And I know that just in doing that, it is unbelievably friable and creates a very fine powder. So I could imagine it would be really hard to get that sort of malt grist that you get from a roller mill out of a stone.
No, we just had a question come in that is precisely appropriate, so I'm just going ahead and read that. Brad Krause is asking, is your roller mill a simple 2-roll? Have you considered a 4 or 6-roll mill to get a more consistent grist and being able to collect the flour for other purposes?
I mean, I think it comes down to just like what we could afford. We have an old Ross Camp 9x12, double roller. And yeah, the 4 to 6 roller mill, I think, is better. We just haven't invested in that.
When did we get the ding thing for questions? I don't remember.
I know. So I keep on thinking I'm having ideas.
Okay. Or angels getting their wings. Sorry, Andrew. We never had a little ding before. It's like, wow.
Yeah, you don't hear the ding? We're getting
ding. I hear the ding on my computer. I hope it's not my kid.
It's questions. I kind of like it. I like it.
Well, on a Mac, right?
As long as we knew what it was. So Brad had a follow-up. You want to get that? See that?
Yeah, he just says we use clear wash for our whiskey since we're using our brewery mill and don't have fermenters that can be cleaned out with on-grain fermentation. So, yeah, I mean, just like you, what they have is driving what they do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
So I wanted to get back to one of the. I know we want to work on these questions, but I also wanted to ask one of the ones I had run by earlier. What the benefit for the farmer? Is there a direct benefit for the farmer if they, like, instead of growing corn for a commodity broker or mill or private buyer, if they're growing small grains and selling to you?
Yeah. I was thinking about this a little bit, Lou, because prior to the last like 8 months, I mean, the commodity market right now is pretty good. Corn is higher than it's been in quite a while, which is kind of where it was when we started Valley Malt. Back in 2010, corn was also pretty high in the futures market. And so what we noticed back then was that it was more difficult for farmers to grow cereal grains because corn is easy. There's, Roundup ready corn. There's all these things that make it an easier crop. And the money was good. And then over the years, that the price that they got per bushel for corn got lower, and we saw more farmers getting interested in malting grains. Now we have those farmers, and they are saying that they're feeling pressure this year to grow more of the commodities. And the reason why they would continue to grow small grains is that we continue to pay really well. We try to always find a way around, unless the quality is really not good, we find ways to use grain that may have certain specs that are slightly off, but we know the right customer, for that. Cool. And so it's really about, keeping a steady, like we contract pretty much all the grain that we purchase. So it's very clear. This is the variety that you're going to grow. This is how much we're going to pay. This is who's going to store it until when. Oh, wow. So it's a very stable source of income potentially. And I think that along with the rotation conversation that we had earlier, along with also the excitement of a new emerging crop and the potential of it. And that is something that I take a lot of personal responsibility for, is that I really want these farmers that have taken that initial risk over the last few years to grow what is essentially a new emerging crop. That's pretty risky. And farmers are not really risky people. They're not in the business of risk.
Yeah, they got enough risk.
Yeah. And so for them to take that initial, to focus away from these easier commodities and to look at something that is more demanding, pay is decent, but the risk is there on a lot of levels. I want to make it worth their while, not just in 2020, 2021, but I want us to be to the point where if they want to grow 500 acres for us in 2025, that we are ready to help them achieve that.
Andrew, would you ever consider introducing or hooking up a farmer with a distiller? Since there's a number of distilleries out there that team up with a certain farm, and then and that way you have a nice little triangle.
Oh yeah, we do it all the time. Yeah.
Okay, there you go then. All right.
Yeah, I mean, just one example this year. Have you guys heard of Tamworth Distilling in New Hampshire?
Oh yeah, I got some bottles of their stuff down on the table now. Yeah,
wonderful people. And we have a dairy farmer. So I'm sure you guys know that dairy farmers are, having a rough go of it. And so this is a dairy farmer in New Hampshire that started growing malting grains for the last 2 years. And we've been purchasing that, and he continues to grow more. And now he's growing winter barley. And it's one of those you know, hopefully success stories. And so Tamworth is definitely very interested in the fact that they can now make a single malt from barley that was grown.
Nice.
Single source.
Right there.
Close. And the farmers, you know, they're a great family. So those kinds of things, I mean, you know, it would almost be odd for one of our brewing or distilling customers to not know the farmer that grew the grain that came through us. In fact, I have, I'm going to just take a little bit of my clothes off here.
What the hell?
Okay.
Oh, nice. Look at
So
that.
Oh,
this is one of the farms that we work with, and I was like, hey, we need to get you some merch.
Oh, nice. Wow.
We made merch for one of the farms that we work with.
Cool.
Beer brought, I don't know, I don't speak German, but this is what he wanted. But basically he grows grains for brewing, distilling, and baking. And this is Oshner Farms in Trumansburg, New York. And
I
I still love tractors on t-shirts. I love tractors.
And so, you know, we like to go as far as, I don't know if there's any Valley Malt on this, but, you know, we make merch for our farmers.
Oh, wow.
And, you know,
like branded Glencairn glasses.
and get them to start Instagram pages because, you know.
Because everyone needs one.
Well, it's how you tell your story, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really telling the story of ground to glass and you can't tag your farm in there.
You know, I was just down at Dancing Star, Robert McDonald, down at his farm. He does a seed farm here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And Jesus, the whole time I was interviewing him, he was on the damn phone, Instagram, and then responded to emails. He's like, let me just get this. I'm like, absolutely. And I'm taking notes the whole time.
Yeah.
And he's on a damn farm out in the middle of Bedford County. I mean, I was going down a road that was falling apart to get to his place. And he's all over the web.
Well, that's the way it's done nowadays.
Yeah.
That's free. That's just it, baby. Free advertising.
Speaking of,
What?
I wanted to ask you, speaking of products, I wanted to ask you about your recycle program.
Oh, yeah.
Recycle.
We want to talk a little bit about that and some of the upcycling agendas that you have going on.
Yeah. So starting last year, for both the flour mill and Valley Malt, we are, all of our packaging is compostable paper or reusable cloth. So our flour bags, our 5-pound retail flour bags, are in these beautiful 9x15 printed cloth bags. I don't have one up here, but they have a nice little paper handle on them. In fact, the paper handle on the back is a postcard so that you can reuse that as a postcard. The bag can be reused to make, you know, like you know, there's all kinds of things you can make it into a gift bag. You could, you know, do some quilting with it, whatever.
Mask you were wearing in the green room, that wasn't a flour sack, was it?
What's that?
Your mask looked like a flour sack.
Our masks. Yeah, we had a bunch of face masks printed out of them.
Actually, no dust inside, right? So
yeah,
right.
And so for the malt house now, we're only doing paper packaging. It took a little over a year to transition because it just took time to like work with customers. And even still, the paper bags are definitely not the best in terms of, you know, if you hit it with the forklift the wrong way, you're going to have leakage. So it's not the best, but at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys ever listened to John Oliver, but he just did a whole thing this week about plastics and how they break down and microplastics and how we're all drinking and every week a credit card worth of microplastics because of the ubiquitous use of plastic in all of our packaging. And so, you know, again, we're small and our decision-making process is pretty easy because it's us. And we just decided that We no longer wanted to feel like we were packaging our malt that is supposed to have this, you know, we're using solar power, we're doing all of these things that we're hoping is a lighter footprint. And to then put it into a polywoven plastic bag just really didn't feel right. And so we just made that commitment. And it feels, you know, like hopefully there will be better solutions in the future, like better innovations. But for now, the 3-ply paper bags and the cloth bags seem to be working for us. And I think that a certain segment of people do appreciate that we're making that effort.
Why not cloth bags with hemp handles? That way you can then smoke the handle later. It's very popular now.
All right, you're going to be part of my next R&D package.
Hello.
Okay?
About time I get a job.
More ideas. We get one every week.
Ideas every week. Yeah.
Actually, one of our new products at the flour mill, if you guys have a minute, one of our grain farmers, that's a vegetable farmer here in Hadley, he grows about 20, 30 acres of winter grain for us every year. He has 60,000 pounds of CBD hemp that he grew and doesn't have a market for.
What?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. And so we started.
Next year, 20 acres of horny goatweed. What? Really?
We started experimenting, and we worked with this lab down in North Carolina that does cannabis and hemp analytics. And we have made a CBD all-purpose flour. So like bake with this, and it has 10 milligrams of CBD per serving. And my mom, I gave like samples to like my mom, and people just
nice.
Love it. They, you know,
has the munchies now, doesn't she?
My mom was like, she always calls it my special flour. She's like, I made cornbread with my special flour. So that's what we decided to call it, was my special flour.
See, that's bad, because now you're going to have people who get the munchies munching on stuff that's just going to give them more munchies. You see how that works? So,
it's a sales idea.
Yeah, just be careful that bro doesn't show up in at your
That's like adding extra salt in the popcorn to get.
Yep. Exactly. But that was actually another license. We did have to, hemp is legal in the United States, actually, thanks to Mitch McConnell.
Blind hog, acorn.
No, but Kentucky grew a lot of hemp, and so he was one of the people that helped to do that. But we still have to, it is regulated. So we had to have, we have a hemp processor license now.
Wow.
To allow us
license to hemp
this special flour.
Hey, so Aaron Hartman had a question that I was wondering as well. Do you have to clean the grain before malting? And have you found a combine setup that works best for malting? No cracking, no less debris. Thank you.
Oh, geez. Yes, you know, definitely if the crop of barley is not really clean, like in terms of like if there's weeds in the field, if there's anything in the field other than beautiful golden barley, you definitely want to clean it to some level. Usually we go and scout all of our fields prior, like right around the week that it's getting harvested. So we see what the crop is going to most likely look like. But yeah, most of the grain passes through a rotary cleaner and then a seed cleaner that's more of, does more separation through screens and airflow. And then after it gets loaded into our silos, before it goes into the steep tank, we have another aspiration to just take out any other dust that has been created through the transfer of the grains. So the cleanest malt that's going to, or barley that's going to go in is going to make the cleanest malt. And so that's kind of our goal. In terms of combining, I'm not an expert in combining. In fact, there are people, even farmers who grow grain, have sometimes people that come in and just do custom harvesting. So I'm not sure. I know there's two different types. There's like a rotary and another type of combining, but really what it has to do with is setting the gap so that the thresher, when it's, you know, banging up the grain to separate it, that it's at the right, it just takes time early on when you're starting to harvest a field to get that that pressure correct so that it doesn't crack any of the barley, but it's enough to fully thresh it and crack off like the little beards and anything else that, you know, might be adhering to the seed. So it's a finessing. I know like one of our farmers says, you know, the first acre of a field is really just adjusting the combine and the fan speed of the combine as well.
Well, is grain like a hot dog? You know how they say a certain amount of nastiness is allowed in a hot dog? Like,
mechanically separated chicken?
Well, no. I mean, like rat dropping.
Don't ever get that up again.
No,
because
there's nothing to hide in malt, though. I mean, you had a little jar of it there. You look at it in your hand.
Yeah,
Marty.
In here, I've had this forever.
Yeah,
peanut butter. That's another example. Peanut butter would be.
Say that about peanut butter, man.
There's a certain amount of regulated other stuff.
This is why I don't like scientists, man. No,
but not
my peanut butter mellow. God damn it.
What is in my peanut butter?
Yeah, but see, I just think though, because I mean, and that's the other thing. You know, you go to old distilleries. I mean, what's the one in the tiny one in Scotland? Used to be the famous grouse. I forget the name of it. Tullibardine? No. So, anyways, they were famous for having this mouser, the Guinness Book of World Records famous mouser who caught 10,000 mice, and because mice get into grain, it's just a thing. So how do you guys? Themselves. How do you know they can't? I wouldn't. If I was a mouse, I'd be all over the grain. I'd find out where Andrea's business was, and I'd be there. Little suitcase. That's the mouse family behind me.
Little tent.
How do you stop that from happening at a mill?
Well, you keep your space clean. So prevent, like any good food safety, right? It's like prevention, prevention, prevention. So you create systems in your process to make sure that we're monitoring the cleanliness, you know, of our environment. You have traps and you have ways to screen if there are issues. You'll see, you know, that there's evidence, and then at that point you beef up your, you know, whatever pest management you're using. You beef it up until that issue is eliminated. But in terms of grain, we have silos now, whereas they probably were storing grain back in the old days in more like cistern type things. But the way that we have silos now, they're really, they wouldn't, most silos wouldn't allow, at least the ones that we use, rodents wouldn't be able to get into them.
Okay.
Squirrels can't even figure it out, Marty.
That's nuts.
Actually, to that point, it's not GMP to have a mouser. To have a cat in a food
I would
safety.
say, Liz, I'm renting out Shadow Tuna to any distillery that has a little rodent problem.
I'm
Shadow
just saying.
Call.
I thought GMP.
What's the matter with cats? Little cat crawling through, as long as they don't think it's a giant litter box.
When we visited Bowmore, when we were doing our Isla tour, I mean, there were birds flying all around that floor malting area.
Well, that's just it. I went to a big malting plant, Aurora, I think it's called, up in Minnesota, and they have an enormous malting floor. I mean, just enormous. And yeah, they had a lot of doors and stuff, but hello. Now, when those little critters want to get in, all the malt is laying out, and it is open to the air. So I'm just thinking it is like a big old Chinese smorgasbord, if there's such a thing.
And you're doing some floor germination as well?
No, and I think if you're talking about raw in Minnesota, the malt is in saladin beds that are definitely not on the floor. And
no, I mean, they're open. I mean, if I was a rat, I could easily jump into it, and I wanted to jump into it. It was so cool looking.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know. I think that if that makes you feel like it's possible,
I'm fine with it.
But I think that given the prevention that I've seen at that facility, I would think that that would be a very, very rare occurrence.
I can't say any aspersions on them. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, I'm fine with any distilled rat poop. I figure once it's distilled,
I'd love to see an Indeed posting though, or like a a job posting for a mouser. I'd love to see what that would be.
What would that look like? Yeah.
I don't know. It would be cat friendly, So
benefits, daily naps.
I only work 1 hour a day, 23 hours I'm sleeping.
So back to your malt house. You mentioned steeping vessels. So you're in separate SGK?
Yeah, we have the process broken out. We used to do it all in one, which is a really great way to get started. Yeah. But several years in, once we had the ability to break out each process, steep tanks, germination bins, and kiln, it was each piece of equipment served its particular objective. Because when you have an all-in-one, like we ended up wasting a lot of water because the air plenum needed for germination and kilning meant that had to fill up with water every single time we steeped. So we were wasting quite a bit of water. So there's a lot of reasons. The depth of the germination bed versus the depth of the kilning bed, you want that to be different. So I definitely see the advantages of wanting to do all in one, because then you don't have to invest in how you're going to convey the grain from one step to another. But
you get a smaller footprint too, right?
And a smaller footprint. Yep. All of those things make it good for that reason. But when you really think about the objectives of each stage in the malting process, you realize that specialized equipment for each one is kind of ideal.
Awesome.
I mean, which is how it's always been done, right? I mean, early on, that's what you used to.
The drums are interesting. There's been a lot of, throughout history, there's been a lot of use of drums instead of, more traditional, like on the floor or in a saladin bed. I know
like a coffee roaster kind of thing, just the rotating.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think most malt house, there are actually a good number of craft malt houses that do the drum system. Yeah.
And I know even from a kilning perspective, there's a lot of new technology out there as well, which I know it's not called this, but I always call it a spy roaster. But Proximity has it where it's the kiln is actually vibrational. It happens through a spiral.
For roasting?
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that system, but if we're talking about history versus, technology and being able to control the process, which Andrea, I think that's what you're getting at is, being able to control each step of the process and very specifically to the application to your customer. So
I mean, I believe that there probably are better ways to do things. It's just hard to take that risk and be like, oh yeah. Let's do this new infrared spiral thing. But what if it doesn't work, And then also part of it too, because we're building this new facility in Holyoke, and people are already used to the bed depth of like our kiln, and it all affects the overall flavor of what Valley Malt Pilsner is, or what Valley Malt pail is. And so when you think about scaling up, we thought about like a drum, but then we were like, well, that's going to be a completely different process, and it could change the flavor of it will change the flavor of our. So we look at how, upgrading our equipment to a larger size, but doing it with the same sort of engineering of our current system, just to assure some quality control of our product.
And you're not
So
doing
much to consider
either, right? So
Floor.
You're not doing high roast though, anyway, right?
Oh yeah, we have a roaster. We do high roast. Yeah, we do a decent amount of roasting.
Okay, interesting.
And actually, for distilleries now, we do.
And you do smoking too, right?
And we do smoking. Yeah.
I think you have several different smoke options.
Yeah. What's the weirdest smoke option you have or you've been asked for?
I mean, I did some hemp smoked malt last year for a special project.
Warm go, bro. Out there again.
Have you done any of the Icelandic dung smoked stuff? Because that's extremely special.
Yummy. Roasted roadkill would be interesting.
We have
I think maybe it's time to wrap up here.
Yeah, well,
we have a couple of quick questions, and then we'll wrap up. Let's see. So the first one is from Tina, asking about herbicide, pesticide parameters to farmers for in the sourcing growing program.
Yes, and I actually want to put more information about this on our website, because more and more we're getting emails, like, especially for our flour mill, almost daily. People are really engaging, and I think it's wonderful. So one of the things that we talked about earlier was growing winter varietals. So one of the benefits of winter varietals is that they need less fertilization. So pounds of nitrogen per acre to get the yield and the quality that you want is, I want to say, almost half of what you need in winter varieties than spring varieties. The winter varieties also, because they're already in the ground and have already grown substantially, when they start growing in the spring, they outcompete and shade a lot of the other weeds that with spring crops, you might need to apply an herbicide in order to help the crop outcompete the weeds that are in the field. So in general, if you talk about it in terms of like how we look at this, growing winter varieties, number one, feels more sustainable to us for those reasons. And then we do not allow for any glyphosate application on the crop. So none of the cereal crops are GMO. However, there has been some usage of glyphosate when a crop is mature, to go in and spray the crop to kill the plant unnaturally, to allow it to dry down, to have it harvested faster. And this is something that the American Malting Barley Association has stated that they are not in support of. The industry in general is not in support of it. However, it's always important to make sure that this is part of our contracts and our conversations with our growers as well. And in terms of herbicides, spring grains definitely at certain points might need an herbicide early on. This would be before there was any emergence of the head or the seed that eventually would be used. And the other thing, in terms of pesticides, I don't think there are a lot of pesticides that are used on cereal grains, to my knowledge. But fungicides, yes. So this is a conversation that we have with growers as the season progresses. And if it's a wet and humid season during a certain time of the grain's development, it is probably advantageous to put a fungicide on the crop to make sure that you're mitigating some of the risk. So we try to be as, low input as possible, knowing that that's ultimately probably where people that care are going to be looking toward making some kind of statement about it. But you know, not all of our grain is organic, and therefore we're kind of trying our best to, you know, to be responsible, but also, you know, make sure that we have grain to malt every season.
I wonder if you eat a bunch of mushrooms, are you guilty of fungicide? Just wondering. I like the name. I mean, that's one of my new favorite word now, fungicide.
I think that,
If that's the case, I'm a serial fungicidist.
A fungicidist.
I think that was Will letting us know that our time is up.
Yeah, our time is up here.
So there were some other questions about what is offered at Valley Malt. So there's a link below.
Yes.
A little green rectangle linking you to Valley Malt. So check that out to learn more about what you can purchase.
And that's the best place for anyone to reach you, Andrea, is your website?
Sure, yeah. And we have an Instagram for both Valley Malt and Ground Up.
So we hear.
Somebody doesn't.
Oh, and Facebook.
Facebook. There you go.
And I think there's some LinkedIn somewhere, guys, but I haven't remembered the password in like 9 years.
I'll find it. Yeah. Oh, actually, if you ever do find your LinkedIn, I connection requested you a couple years ago, still sitting there
Pending
in purgatory. Yeah, just so you know. Yeah, it's all right. Andrew,
I'm happy to make your malt. I will not keep any passwords for anybody.
So before we wrap up, just a sneak peek of what is going to be in session for next week. I know Will put a little link out, but we have Holly Watts from the Avenue Pub. So that's going to be an exciting conversation. So come back.
The easy. Going down to the easy. Oh, damn, baby.
I had my last spring. I had my whole Jazz Fest booked, and
I know.
So much.
The day before the pandemic started,
we were going to go to the Bourbon Festival, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Lou contacted me the night before. I was supposed to get on a plane to go down to New Orleans for the New Orleans Bourbon Festival, and it was canceled. I said, "Screw that! I'm going down there doing a one-man bourbon festival." No pandemic is going to stop me. All right, yes. Next week. Andrew, thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to see you.
Yeah, really nice to be with you guys.
We'll have to get out that way.
Yeah.
I'll drop you a Glencairn catalog.
I would love that.
Yeah. Hello. All right. Very good. Do you wear earrings by chance?
What's that?
You wear earrings?
Yeah, I do sometimes. Not when I'm working, but.
In an order, I'll send you a free pair of Glencairn earrings. Very expensive. They're like $13 a pair.
Whoa. Okay, I'm on it.
I've spotted them in the wild. They're pretty cool.
I'll send you some flour. I'll send you some flour in return.
So this is my low carb diet's over, Will, because I don't think I just sit there and feed it to the cat. All right.
Andrea. Thanks, everyone. Cheers, guys.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye-bye.